Thank you.
The Assad regime's actions against its own people do pose a serious challenge for the president, who had been wary of intervening in previous conflicts. So how has he handled this crisis so far? Has he acted fast enough? Is it too late now? Questions we'll talk about with Leslie Marshall, syndicated radio talk show host and a Fox News contributor. Chris Plant is host of The Chris Plant Show. Welcome to you both.
Hey.
Good morning.
Are you both are familiar with this? You heard what Mike had to say. There's a lot of debate now about whether or not the president, as under Article 1, Section 8, I believe it is, has to go to Congress. They're the ones who would authorize war. But then we get into a discussion of whether this is launching a war. Chris, what's the long game here?
Well, that's a really good question, what the long game is here. There doesn't appear to be much of a long game being taken into account at all. In fact, the whole thing seems to be rushed and half-baked, and there's a distinct lack of clarity as to what our objectives and our goals are. Sure, we can inflict damage on the Syrian military, but we're vowing that we're not after the Assad regime or after the goal of toppling the Assad regime. We've got forces lining up on the other side, including, as Mike mentioned, Russia, and as was mentioned in Mike's report, China's behind them. Iran is looking to create an issue if they can. This might create an opportunity for them to do that. The Israelis are calling up their reservists, and they're handing out gas masks. And I'm not sure, and I did the third hour of my radio show on this today. I had libertarian voices, conservative and liberal voices, and everybody is just scratching their heads saying, what is our goal here? Is this really just about Barack Obama's credibility because he drew an imaginary line in the sand? Or is this about U.S. national security? And are we just parachuting into a civil war that we shouldn't be dropping into the middle of?
All right, let's bring in Leslie. I want to read a quote for you and let you respond. The president does not have power under the Constitution to unilaterally authorize a military attack in a situation that does not involve stopping an actual or imminent threat to the nation. That was then candidate Barack Obama in 2007, Leslie.
Well, first of all, yes, it was. But if I understand the article, it is a declaration of war. The president is commander-in-chief, and it doesn't matter if they're a Democrat or Republican. It doesn't matter if it's Syria or anywhere else for that matter. When you're talking about a missile launch, when you're not talking about a declaration of war, and when you're talking in this situation, as we saw with Libya, no boots on the ground, when you have all, including France, of our allies backing us. And to Chris's point, you know, for 30 months, Russia, China, Iran have been backing the Assad regime. And now I hear people on Chris's side of the aisle, Buddy, saying, why didn't the president do this 30 months ago? You know what? We didn't know there were, in fact, and we do have absolute confirmation that there are weapons of mass destruction, specifically chemical weapons of mass destruction, nerve gas that are affecting the central nervous system, as we see men, women, and children on all the videos that we're watching on television and online, writhing in pain. I do not feel that this is a knee-jerk reaction. And quite frankly, if we are going to talk about an imminent threat, where was the imminent threat to the United States with Afghanistan and with Iraq? Because neither Afghanistan or Iraq bombed us, including on September 11th. The majority of the terrorists were Saudi.
There were plenty of connections there, and that you know, that is something that folks across the Hill, across the spectrum, supported that regardless of party. So at least at that point, they were convinced. Chris,
they supported it based on a lie, though.
No,
well, you go with the best intelligence that you have, and there were those who were convinced with the intelligence that they saw that there was enough reason to act.
And Afghanistan was playing host to al-Qaeda. We asked them to hand over bin Laden and others. They chose not to. We took military action with the support of Congress, accepting one member of Congress at that time. And we don't need to relitigate the Iraq war either. But when Democrats and Barack Obama in particular attacked the Bush administration for their cowboy approach to national security, when President Bush had a coalition of 38 nations going into Iraq, thank you very much, approval of the Congress, and at least involved the UN to the extent that it was reasonable to do so. This president now hasn't even spoken to Congress, Democrats or Republicans, is planning apparently on completely ignoring the legislative branch of government, is using the UN as a sort of a sideshow in this thing, and they're calling for a 4-day delay at the United Nations now in any U.S. military action, and it looks like the administration is going to ignore that as well. So, I mean, if we're talking about cowboy diplomacy and all of our allies, including France, we're talking about England and France. That's not all of our allies. All right. This is about Barack Obama, not about U.S. national security, not about ending ending the Assad
No.
regime, not about ending the civil war. And it's we know it's a powder keg. I understand that.
Let's get Leslie back in here because, Leslie, I want to give you a chance to respond to that but before we run out of time. But also, the fact that the president hasn't been personally calling members of Congress, much less taking this to them for a vote. Would it not help his cause for him to actually pick up the phone or bring them to the White House and say, as they've done over in the UK, let's call our legislators back from their break so we can get some consensus on this before we get involved?
Chris and Republicans, if the president walked on water, would say it is low tide. Makes no difference. And I'll tell you why. I'm almost laughing. Chris, come on. This is a Congress, the Republicans in Congress, who can't even decide that they agree with each other and can't even define who they and their party are and what they feel not only on this issue, but many issues. The only thing they've been able to accomplish is to vote 40 times to defund something that's going nowhere, wasting time and taxpayer money. We are talking about, if you want to talk about, time is of the essence, we don't have the time for a discussion and a debate, because you know what's going to end up at the end of the day? With the Republican majority in the House, they're going to just say no to and disagree with anything that the president and most of the Democrats want. We know this why. This is what has happened in this president's administration.
As our Constitution is written, you don't get to just skip certain branches when you're not having a good time agreeing with them.
We're not declaring war.
Politics is complicated.
And just to clarify, the president's comment that he made when he was running in 2007 wasn't about declaring war. He said launching a military strike. He didn't use the word war. So obviously there's been an evolution there.
I don't agree with that.
All right, we got to leave it there.
That's his comment.
That's his direct quote. Exactly. We will not attribute that to Leslie. Leslie and Chris, great to see you both.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you, Shannon.